Today I'm here with Adam Breneman, former tight end at Penn State and UMass. So thanks for coming on, Adam.
Thanks for having me on, man. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, excited to talk to you as well. So as a former highly touted recruit yourself, I'm sure you had a lot of different offers having gone to Penn State. What can you tell me more about your personal experience during the recruiting process?
Yeah, it was a wild experience for me, man. I mean, I never really thought I was going to be playing big time college football. I wasn't very good growing up at sports. I was kind of the late bloomer, the kid that grew and got big as he got older. And the process started for me by just going to some camps, playing well on film. Had a great high school coach who was super involved in my process, and my first offer, I think, came from Boston College. When Boston College offered my very first offer, literally thought I was going to commit to Boston College on the spot. I remember I was on campus. I was with my family. I bought some Boston College gloves, bought a bunch of clothes and gear, and told everyone I was going to commit to Boston College. And my dad said to me, let's just take a step back and like see how the process plays out. But I was so excited just to get the one offer that I almost committed. Then my process went from there. Things kind of took off. I had Boston College, Temple offered me, and then when Notre Dame offered me is kind of when things took off. They were my third offer, and it really took off from there.
Okay, so seems like you're a relatively young guy. So when did this all take place for you, like your recruiting process?
So I was class of 2013 in high school. So probably 2011, 2012 was when my process was really kicking off.
Okay. And so you're from, was it Central Pennsylvania?
Yeah, from Harrisburg, went to Cedar Cliff High School. Same high school as like Kyle Brady, Coy Wire, some NFL guys. Kind of like a mid-sized high school, not massive, but a pretty decent sized school for that area.
Okay, nice. So having in the kind of current landscape of recruiting and having been recruited relatively recently, and also having been a coach in the past couple of years, can you share just a little bit about how recruiting has evolved over the past maybe like 5 to 10 years?
It's evolved a ton. I think, recruiting, it's changed a lot. The biggest way it's changed is recruiting itself has become its own industry in college football and college basketball. The days of just reading, who the high school Americans were and reading in the newspaper who's going to what school are over. It's a 24/7 constant life of the news cycle, the covering of college football recruiting, the stars, the rankings, and the entire industry that surrounds it is really what's made it. Is really what's changed about it in the last decade or so of college football. I think the other thing is it's changed a lot for coaches itself. I mean, nowadays in college football, recruiting is the lifeblood of your program. If you can't recruit, you will not be successful as a head coach, and there's just no other way to put it. You better be able to evaluate, you better be able to recruit, and then you better be able to develop talent. A high level Power 5 head coach said to me one time, college football is 80% talent acquisition and 20% talent development. That you spend 80% of your time recruiting, developing talent, trying to get guys on your roster, taking kids from the transfer portal, and only 20% of your time as a coach goes into developing that talent. That's a harsh reality. And it doesn't mean you're not focused on the guys on your team. It's just that the resources and the time it takes to bring talent onto your roster is enormous in college football. And the life of a coach keeps getting harder and harder with the early signing periods, with the transfer portal windows, and things like that.
Yeah. So having watched some of your podcast, so it sounds like you've talked to some pretty high level coaches like Coach Franklin, and so what would you say are some of the commonalities that you found in a really good recruiter, and also what should a high school student who's getting recruited look for in a program?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first part, what do you look for in a good recruiter? What makes a coach a good recruiter? If a college coach wants to be a good recruiter, it takes, number one is tenacity. Like, you have to be thinking about it and living it and breathing it every second of every day. The great recruiters are not necessarily the best coaches. They're not the best former players. It's the guys who grind on the recruiting trail and relentlessly are on the phone, calling, texting, evaluating, talking to people who are close to the kid. The time it takes to be a high-level recruiter is the first part. So you have to be tenacious and have that drive to want to be the best at it and really compete at it. For some coaches, they don't like recruiting. Like, they don't love doing it. They don't like spending time on it. Those coaches should get out of college football and go to the NFL. That's the reality. Like, get out of college. You're not going to move up in the world of college football if you don't recruit. So that's number one. You got to be tenacious and spend the time doing it. Number two, you have to have some charisma and be relatable to high school athletes and their families. You have to be the guy that can walk into a living room and make everyone in that living room trust you and love you. You have to be able to relate to a high school athlete. And a lot of that, some of that comes from being a former player like me, and a former big recruit. I can say I was in your shoes. I went through what you're going through. Or it's just having a great personality that people want to be around with some charisma and some and great communication skills. So I think those are really the two big things. If you have the work ethic and the drive, some people just have the charisma, but they don't have the drive and the tenacity and the work ethic to be a great recruiter. Some people have the great work ethic, aren't that great of, in a living room, aren't that great of a communicator. It's funny, those guys who have the work ethic still end up being relatively successful at recruiting. It's all about work ethic and time commitment. The best recruiters do it, day in and day out. It's their life. Recruiting is a 24/7 job. It's essentially their entire life.
Yeah. And I can totally relate to just the tenacity aspect, especially being a former player. Like, I think from my experience, people who've played college and even pro football, a lot of times tend to transition pretty seamlessly into the coaching roles. So as you had done so going from UMass to ASU, can you talk about what that looked like in that transition from playing to coaching?
Yeah, for me, I didn't think I wanted to coach when I stopped playing football. I thought the coaching life is a grind. It's not for me. But to be honest with you, the reason I got into coaching was I saw head coaches and how they were able to, one, run and build a program, and two, how they were able to impact people's lives. So I spent a lot of time with Coach Franklin at Penn State and got to watch him. I watched him come to Penn State during one of the worst times in college football history and take over a program that was in the dark ages and bring that to life. I watched guys like Bill O'Brien do a great job. I was around Mark Whipple at UMass. I was around so many great coaches and big personalities and great program builders. The more I watched them, the more I was like, man, I think I could do this. I want to try to be a head football coach. That was my goal. I remember I went and talked and met with Coach Franklin in his office, and I told him I was thinking about coaching and I wanted to, and the reason is because I want to try to be a head coach. And that at that point, I remember Coach Franklin said to me, well, you got to get into it at some place. You can't just go be a head coach. So you're going to have to go be a GA. So I had to get a GA job. And I actually didn't get any opportunities for a few months. I was kind of discouraged. I was making some calls, but nothing came up until I got a random call one day. I was working some job in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was working at a marketing media firm in Pennsylvania. And my former strength coach, who was my strength coach when I was at UMass, was now the strength coach at Arizona State. And he called me and he's like, hey, I think we're looking for a GA that could coach the tight ends. GA, for anyone who doesn't know, is a graduate assistant, low-level coach on the coaching staff. And he said, would you be interested? I said, absolutely. And then next thing you know, I got a call from the offensive coordinator, Zach Hill. I had known Herm Edwards a little bit because Herm Edwards coached me at the Under Armour All-American game when I was in high school. And that was like a Friday, and I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona by Monday. I mean, it happened fast. And I went out to ASU on a whim. I'd never been there before, and was a coach on the staff, and that's how I got into it. And it kind of just took off from there. But for me, it was just trying to find that right opportunity.
Wow. So, I mean, that's kind of the same thing you were talking about in recruiting, just having that tenacious mindset. So that seems like that served you well, especially in your early days of coaching.
Yeah, for me, when I got to when I got to Arizona State, I was a graduate assistant, low man on the totem pole, got promoted in 10 months to tight ends coach. I was the youngest tight ends coach in the country, youngest, excuse me, youngest position coach in Power 5 football. And that path was very quick for me, which is different than a lot of guys. I'm very thankful. A lot of things had to happen, right? Someone had to leave, and a lot of things fell into place for me to allow me to get promoted to a Power 5 position coach at 25 years old. That's a very aware that wasn't just my doing. A lot of things fell into place. But I think for me, when I became a graduate assistant, I realized right away in college football that the best coaches were what I just told you. They are elite recruiters and they're great communicators. It's not the guys who know football the best. Now, I think I know football really well, and that wasn't something I didn't care about or wasn't focused on. But I learned very quickly that the guys in college football who know football really well, but don't recruit and can't communicate, they stay in the same job for their entire career and never become position coaches, never become coordinators, never become head coaches. They never move up because the value you have to bring to a college football program is you have to be able to acquire talent. That is what it comes down to. And I learned that really quickly in my time at ASU. And when I saw that, I was like, well, I'm going all in on recruiting then. I'm going to be the best recruiting GA in college football. I was a freaking GA recruiting my butt off, calling kids like I was the head coach, calling kids like I was a position coach. I was offering kids, I was evaluating them. And a lot of it was, I was kind of just doing my own thing and asking for forgiveness later, right? I was like, I'm going to go recruit my butt off and go get guys. I'd be recruiting. I was a tight ends GA. I'd be recruiting like a defensive end. I'd call a kid. I'd get a relationship going. I'd get them up to the point where like, I was like, okay, at some point I got to have the defensive ends coach talk to the guy, right? So then but I would bring value by getting him to the point where he's ready to have that bigger conversation and having that relationship. And I was able to relate really well with kids because with high school recruits, because I had been through it not that long ago. I was a good recruit. I went through the process. And that's what happened for me. I started getting some recognition pretty early on just for my recruiting ability and how much I loved it and how much I enjoyed it. Started getting some attention for it from different programs, from media, and most importantly, internally on our staff. And that it put me in a position when that job became open at ASU and that tight ends job came open, that I made it easy for everyone in the program to say this should be Adam's job because he's worked his butt off. He can recruit the best players in the country, and they saw how I carried myself in the office and how I communicated with the players and how I led a room. It wasn't necessarily Adam knows the best tight end footwork in the country. That's not what anyone was thinking about. It wasn't that. It was Adam can communicate. The guys like him, and he'll recruit his butt off. That's why we're promoting him.
Yeah. And how much of that, like beyond charisma and beyond communication abilities, is just pure confidence and acting as if you are the best recruiter in the country?
It's a good question. I think a lot of it is confidence, but to be honest, when you start out, it's almost you don't really have the confidence. You're almost just putting on the front to like that you have the confidence. You don't really know what you're doing when you start. Yeah. But again, if you can communicate and you work hard, a lot of times, man, if you just work hard, like luck and confidence just come to you naturally, right? You're just putting yourself in good positions. You're allowing luck to happen. And I think for me, it was all of it combined, and it was needing to have the confidence. And then once some good things start happening to you, it kind of spirals and you get more confidence and more confidence. But I think 100%, I think what you said about, it's not just charisma and communication skills. You have to be able to walk in a room and people look at you and don't say, oh, he's the 25-year-old kid who's the GA. They say, oh, that's a guy who carries himself really well. He's always on time. He takes notes. He's attentive. He asks great questions. He cares about other people. And it's easy for them to see you in a bigger role. There's people all the time in college football. I'll be around young, even players or coaches who you're around and you're just like, you don't know why, but you just say, that guy will be a head coach. Like he is actually a head coach. He carries himself like a head coach. And it's never because he can draw off the best plays on the whiteboard. That's never why you say that. It's because he has great confidence, he has great poise, he communicates well, he knows how to relate to people. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I think the one point you made about, especially early on, when you don't have experience, it's really just about like acting, like just knowing that you can do it. But once it starts to spiral, one of the people that I listen to, Alex Ramosi, he always talks about stacking confidence. So when you stack evidence, that builds confidence. So you can look back and say, okay, the reason that I'm successful and the reason I'm confident is I made, I don't know, 1,000 calls over the past month or something like that.
Yeah. Dude, the funniest thing is that I was just going to say the Alex Ramosi quote. That was going to be my answer to this was, yeah, Alex Ramosi has the quote that I think Alex Ramosi says, it's confidence doesn't come from shouting affirmations in the mirror. It comes from having a stack of proof that you are who you say you are. And to me, when you're a young coach, you have to stack that proof every single day. It comes from first hard work. Once you do it, it spirals into more and more. Once you make the calls recruiting, once you run a team meeting, once you ask a great question in front of the coaching staff, once you do all those things, you get a little bit more and more to then for yourself. You're like, oh, I am who I say I am. I can be a great recruiter. I can be a great coach. And then it just kind of spirals and you get momentum in life. I always say life is all about momentum. Like it's when you have momentum, you better keep it. And when you lose momentum, you got to get it back as fast as possible. Right. And momentum, a lot of times back to it comes from hard work.
Yep. And I mean, that's the foundation of anything. It's, if like in our world as entrepreneurs, like starting your own business and taking the lessons that we've learned as former players, like, because I played my college ball at Gettysburg College, and although it's a different level, I mean the same principles are learned. So that's I think that's key in anything you're doing.
No doubt. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, all right. Was there anything else you wanted to share advice wise to the audience or just to any athlete who might be getting recruited right now?
Yeah, good question. Any advice? I think for athletes that are trying to get recruited, number one, have a social media presence, clean up your profile, make sure your Twitter handle is your name, make sure you have your graduating year in your bio, little things. When you send messages to coaches, I used to get them all the time with like spelling errors. My name wasn't in them. They'd say the wrong school. Like have some attention to detail to you and make sure you're doing things the right way if you're trying to get recruited. And just make sure that you're putting yourself out there and reaching out to coaches. I mean, when I was coaching, I really did find recruits from kids DMing. I mean, from kids messaging me on Instagram or Twitter and saying, "Coach, here's my film. I have offers from these schools. What do you think? Would like to talk." I mean, I found kids that way. So putting yourself out there, I think, is super important. And I think the more you can do, the more you can appear on social media and appear in camps, the better your chances are. It's all a numbers game when it comes down to recruiting.
Yeah. Great. Well, Adam, pleasure speaking with you today. Well, I think we covered some really good topics, and thank you all for listening.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.